Hola todos! You've done your reading and listening papers for Spanish now, and these on screen were the overall ratings for each paper. But we've done those now, and we've got one final exam left. And for some of you, this is your final GCSE exam ever. Writing is the paper we can prepare most for, so these are my top tips and what to do before Tuesday. Vamos! My first and actually biggest tip is to say what you can and not what you want. Please don't make up language that you've never heard of. Hopefully by now you've realized that Spanish and English grammar have quite a lot of differences, so you cannot translate directly from one language into another. For example, saying soy 15 años, we know that we use the verb tener for age, so it would be tengo 15 años. So unless you know how to say it, don't say it and find another way of communicating that same message. And this goes on to my second tip, which is please go through grammar and know your tenses. That's the backbone of this paper, unlike reading and listening where vocabulary was the backbone. I've got detailed grammar videos which you can use, especially these two summary videos going through all the tenses and endings. If you still have any questions, drop a comment. For foundation students, go through the present tense fully again, as that's the tense you'll mainly use in questions 1 and 2. And then for the translation and 90-word questions, you should also know the preterite, imperfect, near future, simple future, and conditional tenses. For higher tier, you better be comfortable with basically all the tenses, as you'll need to use a variety including both the perfect tenses, the present and the imperfect subjunctive, especially for question 2 in both AQA and EdXL, and the translation questions. My third tip is to learn the irregular verbs like I, es, son, está, era, fue. You need to know the meaning and the differences of all of these verbs. They're all super common, and because they're so common, students tend to merge them all into one and get them mixed up. I've got a separate video on this and the random irregular verbs that you also need to know, as they will appear in the translation questions. Okay, next let's talk about complex language and phrases. So for the second higher tier question in particular, you want to go all out and use lots of complex language and fancy sentence starters and generally just uncommon language, so we're avoiding the repetition of basic adjectives like divertido. I've got lots of videos and phrases you can learn. There's no one perfect list, just learn 5 or so that you like to use and that you know how to correctly use. And on my website I've got a PDF list of them with examples. The main thing is to use ones you know how to conjugate and fit in, especially with idioms. It's better to not use them versus use them incorrectly. If you want to use one like costar un ojo de la cara, you've got to be able to conjugate the verb costar, which in the present tense is stem changing, so it would become cuesta versus costa. The fifth tip is proofreading. A lot of you know what the correct grammar is, but you need to be reminded to check your work at the end. Everyone at the end of either the paper or the question, please go back and check things like adjective agreements, singular and plural verbs. If you're talking about a plural noun like los deportes, me gusta needs to be me gustan, and es needs to be son. I'm sure all of you know this, but for some reason you all forget basic grammar in the exam. Okay, next let's practice a bullet point here. And this is a particularly challenging one. So some of your bullet points will be quite basic and sort of easy to answer, but some of them will be niche, so maybe even in English you might struggle to come up with an answer. Let's do this one here. So tu opinión sobre la importancia de aprender idiomas. And we're going to treat this as like a 150-word bullet point in the higher tier paper. So first we're going to read the question which we've done, so we're going to translate it as well. So your opinion about the importance of learning languages. Idiomas, like the word lengua, is language. The next part of our plan is going to be thinking about the tenses. So the main tense of this bullet point is, as hopefully you can see, the present tense. But in this question, we want to use other tenses. So I'm going to tell myself I'm also going to use the future, and maybe what else can I use with the future? Like the conditional or something like the subjunctive, the present subjunctive, because you can sort of really easily use that with the future. Okay, and the final part of my plan is writing down complex structures. The way I would learn complex structures is in some sort of acronym. For example, I've already planned one earlier. CLASS is the one I'm going to use. Let's do this somewhere else. And class stands for cuando sea mayor. So the subjunctive in there, cuando sea mayor. Lo que más me gusta. Lo que más me gusta. You can say like es que. A mi modo de ver. Sin una sombra de duda. Without a shadow of a doubt. Sin una sombra de duda. And T is tengo la intención de. So now that I've got a super quick just acronym, and in the exam you would just write the letters and you would just have learned beforehand what the acronym stands for, I'm going to try and use some of these. I don't have to use all of them, but the more I use generally the better in this answer here. So we're going to aim for about 75-ish words, like about a paragraph, right? We don't have to write equal amounts for each bullet point, but let's try and do around 70, 80 words. So let's start off here. I'm going to start off with my opinion. Let me make my pen even smaller. So a mi modo de ver, I've already ticked off my first opinion there. A mi modo de ver, which is that sort of A letter in there. From my point of view, I think it's super important. So I'm going to say aprender idiomas. I'm going to repeat some of the words there. Aprender idiomas. We can just copy those two words exactly as it's written there. Es importante. I'm going to be fancy and say importantísimo. This is our way of exaggerating. Super important, importantissimo. Then I'm going to say, let's talk about maybe why I think so. So let's do it as a second line here. Para decir la verdad. To say the truth, para decir la verdad. Let's give a negative. We're going to say, para decir la verdad, odio, like in school, odio mi, maybe profesor de español. So saying, I hate my Spanish teacher, pero, a contrasting view, pero, según is a really good one, according to, según mi, maybe padre, according to my dad, según mi padre, why languages is important. I can say it's useful. I can say aprender idiomas es útil, or maybe es una habilidad. It is a skill. Una habilidad is a good word there. Habilidad, muy útil, maybe. Okay, and then just if you ever get stuck, look back at your list and see if there's anything you can pick from there. So I'm going to do sin una sombra de duda. I'm going to just force myself to say it and go from there. I tend to not plan it like sort of too much, but it's up to you how you want to do it. Anyway, so sin una sombra de duda. And now I'm forcing myself to say something here. Make sure what you say obviously makes sense. So if you don't know how to say it, back to sort of tip number one. If you don't know how to say something, don't say it, right? Only say what you actually know how to say. Oops. So sin una sombra de duda, I'm going to say the advantages. So sin una sombra de duda, I'm going to say te permite, it allows you, plus the infinitive, descubrir, maybe nuevas culturas is one advantage of learning languages, right? So to discover new cultures, culturas, full stop. Además, or también is good enough. También, let's say, again, te permite something else. So te permite make new friends. We can say hacer nuevos amigos. Hacer nuevos amigos. Pero, I'm going to use here sobre todo, above all, sobre todo. If you're going to list some things, we're going to say the most important thing, sobre todo. The one I like to say is te abre la mente, it opens sort of your mind for you, te abre la mente. Okay, full stop. So that's what I've written so far, sort of a couple sentences there. And I've ticked off sin una sombra de duda. Let's do a future maybe sentence, so like cuando sea mayor, because all of it so far has been in the present tense, hasn't it? Yeah. So cuando sea mayor, the subjunctive here, when I'm older, cuando sea mayor. Tengo la intención. I have the intention, tengo la intención de, plus the infinitive, so maybe visitar. Country, so España, because we've spoken about español. Why am I going to celebrate Spain, or what do I want to do that? I can say para, maybe like, nice and easy, celebrar mi cumpleaños. Cumpleaños, nice and easy. I would like to celebrate my birthday, or in order to celebrate my birthday, mi cumpleaños, and that's the plural noun there, okay? I'm going to leave it there. That should be roughly about a paragraph's worth. You can always write a bit more, but I'm happy leaving it there. Okay, moving on to tip number 7. If you've got time, go ahead and attempt a full past paper to work out timings for yourself. There's 3 questions for higher and 4 for foundation. It's up to you to manage your time, obviously, between them. Generally, you will have excess time for this paper because they always give you sort of more time than you actually need. Make sure to plan your questions properly, even if it's a super short plan. Write down any phrases you want to use, as you've seen me do just before, and things like tenses and stuff like that. Because I know people will ask, the rough timings I recommend for higher tier is 20 minutes on question 1, 35 on question 2, and then whatever time you've got left on the translation question and proofreading. And bear in mind, you will have some time left. There is no need to change the order of the paper, so go through in the order as it's written. In terms of what to do before the exam and other revision, I would say go back and learn your speaking answers again, because you can use those in the writing exam, as well as learn as many sentences and good vocabulary as you can from this knowledge organizer here. It's genuinely a really, really good resource. It's specifically for AQA, but it's useful for Excel as well. It's not made by me, but I'll link it below. My 9th tip, we're nearly at the end here, my 9th tip is all about the word count. So you need to cover all of the bullet points in the question you answer, but you do not have to write equal amounts for each. That's the first myth. And secondly, you can and should go at least a little bit above the recommended word count, just to make sure you've said enough to get marks. There is no maximum word count for any of these questions. In the exam, I would estimate the length of my answer. Don't sit there and count every single word unless you're really bored. And then to go through some miscellaneous vocabulary, so se puede is the fancy way of saying someone can. So instead of saying puedes plus the infinitive, you can use se puede. For example, se puede hacer nuevos amigos. And this is just the passive voice, and it's saying so if someone can do the infinitive. Ropa and gente are both singular feminine nouns, so we never say las gentes, it's always singular. And lastly, the translation question, you do need to know some sort of random vocabulary, even though it's sort of only 12 marks. It's a bit more than the translation in the reading paper. So the first sentence, my studies are important. Mis estudios is pretty much the only word for studies. They are important. Son versus es, son importantes. We don't need to say muy because it's not saying very, it's just important. Son importantes. Because, por qué, stick to sort of the basic por qué. I want to go, quiero ir I want to go to university, quiero ir a la universidad. Is pretty much the only accepted answer I'm going to say. I guess you could swap out por qué for ya que, but keep it simple, just por qué. Okay, the next sentence I'm going to write as a separate line. So a next line, along, leave space in your work. I have ambitions. There's a few ways we can say this. Tengo ambiciones is the way I would go for this. Tengo ambiciones. You could say tengo la ambiciones like a singular or something like tengo ganas de, maybe, but I'm going to stick with tengo ambiciones. Of becoming, we don't say sort of siendo, that word sort of ing becoming. We just say de ser profesor or profesora. We don't know if this narrator here is masculine or feminine, but we never say un for job. So just one thing to remember, we never say un profesor. We just say after ser profesor. So tengo ambiciones de ser profesor. Next, my parents, so mis padres. What does it say? Mis padres have supported me. If you get stuck, just before have, put in they. That's going to help you think about they have, right? Instead of just like, sort of, what is this? Is it I, is it you, he, she? It's they in this case. My parents, they have supported me. We're not going to use tener, we're going to use the verb haber. This is the perfect tense. So mis padres have supported me. So me han apoyado. You could say like ayudado, but I'm going to stick with apoyado because that's the word sort of to support. Me han apoyado. If you struggle with this, it's the perfect tense for sort of higher tier perfect tense. Go through that. So have supported me mucho, a lot, mucho. And I revise, repaso, from the verb repasar, at home, repaso, en casa, every evening. You could say cada tarde or noche, or like todas las noches or todas las tardes. I would stick with tarde, but also noche is also sort of means evening. There depends if you're saying sort of how late the evening is, but either of those are fine. Okay, the next sentence, the day before yesterday, is anteayer, quite a tricky word there, anteayer. Just like ayer is yesterday, anteayer is the day before yesterday. I returned home quite late. Volví, the present tense of to return, volví, from volver, a casa, what was it, quite late, and I studied. Bastante tarde, I'm going to put there, quite late, and I studied, estudié, your present tense again, the AR verb, estudié, for 3 hours. Por, you could say, or like durante, I'm going to say por 3 horas, for 3 hours. We don't use para here, we use por. One more sentence, although it was boring, aunque o a pesar de que fue aburrido, with a double R there, fue aburrido, because, yeah, we're describing sort of it, meaning like the study session or whatever. It was boring, aunque fue aburrido. I learned a lot, aprendí, again, the present tense, aprendí mucho. So, it's like saying therefore. I could say quite a few things. I could say por eso, or like así que. I'm going to say así que. So, it was worth it from valer la pena, quite a tricky one, valer la pena. In the present tense, it's not irregular, so just valió, with the accent on the O, valió la pena. It was worth it, valió la pena. Okay, any questions, I leave a comment, but that's how I'm going to do this translation here. And I would do it as sort of separate lines in your work, leave a sort of line in between on the page. If you want to go back and make changes, you've got space to make changes. Okay, here's one more for you guys to attempt in the comment section down below. Take a screenshot there, pause the video, attempt this one in the comments down below, and I will mark it for you guys. I'm going to read and reply to every single comment, so I will give you some feedback. Those are my 11 top tips for writing. I don't want to make this video any longer than it needs to be, so I wish you all the absolute best of luck. Adios!